Thanks for your time, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it. I'm interested in what you thought, your immediate thoughts were when the script landed on the desk, or were you aware of it before it was coming? I mean, when you read through it, what was your mind telling you?
Well, Cord sent me, the script. Cord sent me the script along with a letter, and he described how he had begun to read the book with my voice in his head and then wrote the script, haunted by, similarly by my voice. And I was kind of flattered by that, I guess. I had not read the book prior. I started reading his script, and really the first scene was the hook in the mouth for me. I thought that it was a conversation that I wanted to have publicly, and that it was sharply drawn, and that it was speaking to this absence of fluency in race language, an absence of understanding how to contextualize race language. I thought it was a necessary conversation for the times, particularly as relates to younger generations and for that matter, and their attempts to wrestle with issues that we have been wrestling with, since the beginning. So it was just a rich introduction to this story. And then as I read further, while I very much appreciated the social commentary and the satire, what I was really drawn into in an emotional way was the family dynamic, and the portrait of a man who finds himself in an instant at the center of family crises, and that was something that was very personal for me. And in some ways, as we made the film, and now as we're presenting the film, that family is, in spite of the other kind of socio-political elements of the film, that family, I think, is the most radical aspect of our film and the most subversive, because it's a family that we don't often see in cinema. And it's extraordinary for that reason, in its ordinariness, in its simple humanity. As messy and beautiful and odd and wonderful as any other family.
Well, I said to Cord yesterday that it was, the dynamic was brilliant in terms of there's complexity running right through it, but relatability at the same time. So
yes, and I think there's a relatability across backgrounds and borders. We're so often told that, stories from filmmakers like Cord or myself or Sterling K. Brown or, won't translate or, across borders. But the difference with our film is that we had support from a woman named Lana Mayo at Orion, the head of Orion Pictures, a black woman. And for her, I think the window on what is on the possible is much wider than most others in her position.
Right.
And so she, like we, appreciated this story, wanted to be told, but also that, for lack of a better term, it's marketable. Film's not out yet. We've been well received. And in the ideal, she and we will be proven right, because yeah, it's just the story of some people.
It's a story of a lot of people.
Yeah.
If I'm honest,
Yeah.
if I'm honest with you, I said to Cord that for me there was bits missing, so I'm hoping there's a TV series. what say you on that? And speak to his directorial debut and working with him in that environment.
Well, I like to just take things as they are. I've watched the movie with an audience for the first and only time about a week or so ago in Brooklyn, and I've made my peace with it. I tend to be a bit neurotic about my work, and so once I saw it with an audience, it allowed me to push away some of my concerns and anxieties and things like that. So I think I think it stands on its own. Yes, there's space for more. We'll see, but I'm appreciative of what it is. Cord is a wonderful communicator. That's clear from the script that he wrote. The primary responsibility of a director is to communicate his or her vision through the camera's aperture and onto the screen, but also to communicate that vision on a film set to everyone who's gathered to help make the film. Cord was super respectful of the limitations of his experience, which was a big help for him. He didn't pretend to know more than he knew. But he was able to learn the mechanism of a film set. And that can take some time, but he learned it quickly. He's one of the sharper knives in the drawer. And he was able to communicate his vision in a clear and compelling way and galvanize everyone to follow him down the trail. He's a wonderful leader, and he did so with a good sense of humor and a healthy dose of humility. So he makes for an excellent leader and director.
Now that you've got a chance to exhale, sit with an audience, how do you feel about the movie now?
When I watched the movie, it's funny. Generally I tend to think that if a story interests me, it will interest an audience. If it moves me, it will move an audience. And when I watched it, there were moments where I was drawn into it and I was moved. So I know it works. And also, there was a moment where I was watching really the people populating the family, and I said to myself, what beautiful people. And if you can, and I think audiences will see that too. So, I mean, if we made a film that is moving, whether through its humor or through its pathos, and there are moments within it that are beautiful, then we've done our job. And we had a sense when we were working on it that we were doing something that could be pretty good. You sense it in the way people are working around you from day to day. And there was a gathering momentum as we worked on this that doesn't happen all the time on a film set. So yeah, I'm pleased with this film. I'm proud of it.
Before we get to some of the behind the scenes conversations, which would have definitely transpired as a result of what you guys were discussing, what was your favourite scene? I'll tell you mine in a second.
Favorite scene?
To do or to watch?
No, I don't
Whatever
know.
it may be.
I don't know if I have a favorite.
No.
Favorite scene. One of the most striking scenes when we filmed it was the scene when Monk writes the book. When Keith David and Oak showed up that day, we weren't sure what to expect, and the moment they started performing that those parts, I realized that scene would legitimize the entire film in some ways. It was so striking, and there was such a forcefulness in what they did. So it called into question Monk's mockery of the idea in a way that I thought provided nice tension to the film. I mean, I don't want to kind of claim preference over any of my babies in this film, but that scene was very, very striking. I mean, there were many across the board, but But I do feel that scene, and also the scene with Issa Rae, those two scenes legitimize everything in some regard.
The latter that you just said, that was the one for me.
Yeah,
because there was everything in it.
Yeah, that scene is really the thesis of the movie.
Everything was in it. You know, I mean, as it was playing out, and I've only seen the movie once, but I remember it.
Yeah.
Right? And everything was playing out at that moment. It was two professional black people engaged in discourse.
Yeah.
With opposing views, but brought together by the same medium.
Yeah.
Both skilled and both very staunch in their views about, but respectful of the fact that they could agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And very insightful on their industry.
Yeah.
And we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
That often. You know? So I thought that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It was well executed. And even when I spoke to Cord yesterday, and he was saying he wasn't sure about that scene because it's a lot of talking, right?
Yeah.
And I recently spoke to Nia DaCosta, and she was talking about this director's need to do it differently.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a scene with two people talking across the table, how can we? I mean, that's been done to death.
Yeah.
How can we do it differently? There was no need.
Yeah.
To over embellish.
Yeah.
It was done excellently.
Oh, thank you.
My last question then was, so with issues that are discussed in this, humour's obviously you know used quite well to underpin it. You guys impart that brilliantly.
Yeah.
So talk about the necessity to do that to make this as palatable as it was.
Yeah. What I appreciate about the satire and the absurdity is that in some ways it's necessary, and it's born out of a type of pathos and melancholy, so that the satire, for me, when I watched it, seemed like tragedy in disguise. We laugh so we don't cry. And there's an organic relationship, therefore, between all of the elements in the film. In some ways, the satire is born out of necessity. The absurdity, anyway, of Monk's life and choices is in part born out of his sense of responsibility to his mother. Not entirely, but that certainly informs it. That I will necessarily play this role in order to be caretaker. Because he tries to get out of it on multiple occasions. But, you know, he's as well drawn back into it, both by his agent, John Ortiz, who's wonderful, but also out of the necessity
Circumstance.
to be the circumstances. It's funny, we've screened the film in Washington at the museum, the Smithsonian Museum of African American History. It's my first time there, so I went on a little bit of a tour earlier. And they took me to this culture section. And there was an exhibit that featured Bert Williams. Bert Williams is like kind of a artistic North Star for me. He, his was a kind of caricature of blackface and minstrelsy. It was like a self-conscious awareness of the ridiculousness. And and so I mentioned him in this talk afterward, and the moderator drew a parallel between Bert Williams and Monk that I hadn't considered, but I think is valid. What we must do out of necessity in order to survive. The story goes on. And Bert Williams, was at the beginning, the absolute beginning of black cinema and cinema generally. And here we are, in some ways,
with American fiction,
retelling his story with American fiction. Yeah.
Jeffrey, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Could have gone another half an hour,
Oh,
45 minutes.
cool, man.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Plenty to do. So
Thanks, bro.
Look after.
Okay,
right?
man. Yeah, man. Be good.
Yeah.
Cool, man.